When examining Carl Jung's model of the psyche, you will discover a profound division between your external reality and your internal landscape. The persona operates as a social mask you adopt, functioning as a bridge between your conscious ego and the surrounding society. However, the true psychological journey commences once you venture into the hidden depths of the inner world, also known as the unconscious. Within this hidden realm, you confront profound archetypes such as the shadow, the anima, the animus, and the self, each possessing both illuminated and obscured facets, according to Jung. You can deduce the nature of your shadow by examining the personal unconscious, which consists of elements accumulated throughout your existence. Achieving awareness requires you to accept the darker traits of your character as authentic and active. Otherwise, you will inevitably project these hidden flaws onto those around you, transforming your environment into a mirror of your own unrecognized darkness. Consequently, engaging in shadow work becomes a mandatory, yet deeply resisted step toward your genuine self-understanding. Although your shadow invariably shares your gender, projections involving the opposite sex emerge from a distinctly contrasexual psychological entity. This dynamic introduces the anima in men and the animus in women, figures that frequently lurk just behind the shadow and trigger incredibly complex psychological challenges. Failing to bring your anima into the light of consciousness ultimately forces it into a destructive union with your shadow. Men possess the anima, which embodies their latent feminine psychological traits, whereas women harbor the animus, a representation of their dormant masculine characteristics. Because these forces possess a complementary design, they consistently manifest the specific qualities you lack in your conscious life, operating as autonomous archetypes within the collective unconscious, a repository of inherited behavioral blueprints. They prove exceptionally challenging to seamlessly incorporate into your identity. Yet, much like your persona links you to external society, your anima, or animus, serves as the crucial conduit connecting you to the profound depths of your own mind. Having previously established the foundational concepts of the persona, the shadow, and the collective unconscious, the narrative now naturally progresses to a detailed examination of the anima and animus. Jung famously characterized the confrontation with the shadow as the psychological apprentice piece, while designating the encounter with the anima as the ultimate masterpiece. Consequently, the initial phase of Jungian analysis demands the successful integration of your shadow and the realization of your personal unconscious. Bypassing this crucial first step makes any subsequent recognition of your contrasexual archetypes fundamentally impossible. While mythology frequently features the shadow alongside the anima and animus, the shadow remains tethered to your personal unconscious, making its contents relatively accessible to your waking mind. In stark contrast, these contrasexual figures reside at a profound distance from conscious awareness, meaning you will rarely recognize them under ordinary circumstances. Therefore, consciously acknowledging their existence remains your necessary starting point, paving the way toward the ultimate psychological synthesis, the archetype of the self, which encompasses the absolute totality of your being. If you navigate society as a man, you frequently overemphasize your masculine persona by projecting an image of unyielding strength, leaving your feminine traits entirely submerged. Because you remain blind to these latent qualities, you inevitably cast negative anima projections onto the women you encounter. Traditionally, this male psychology heavily prioritizes the rational ego and external achievements, effectively trapping you in the material realm and severing your connection to the unconscious. Conversely, women generally maintain a closer harmony with their internal landscape, which explains the observable psychological divergence, where men frequently fall prey to irrational moods, whereas women might cling to irrational opinions. In Jungian theory, the anima aligns with the concept of maternal eros, while the animus resonates with paternal logos. Successfully integrating these figures transforms your psyche, The anima injects a man's conscious mind with a profound capacity for emotional connection, just as the animus equips a woman's consciousness with enhanced logical reflection and rigorous self-analysis. Furthermore, the specific ways these archetypes manifest within you are heavily influenced by the unique interactions you have experienced with members of the opposite sex throughout your lifetime. You inherently carry an eternal, archetypal image of the opposite sex within your mind, functioning not as a portrait of a specific individual, but as a universal blueprint. Jung highlighted that you project these deeply ingrained internal patterns directly onto the real men and women you interact with daily. If you are a man, the woman within, your internal collection of feminine attributes, is predominantly sculpted by your relationship with your mother. Should you harbor feelings of maternal rejection or toxicity, your internal anima will frequently materialize through sudden bouts of irritability, deep-seated insecurity, and persistent depressive moods. Deep inside your mind, this toxic mother anima perpetually broadcasts a narrative of profound worthlessness, convincing you that your existence lacks meaning and that joy is reserved exclusively for others. These insidious emotional states plunge you into a paralyzing dullness, fostering an intense phobia of illness, failure, and unexpected disaster. Ultimately, your entire reality becomes shrouded in an oppressive gloom, and these overwhelming psychological shadows can sometimes drive a person towards self-destruction, effectively transforming the anima into an agent of death. Although designed as the ultimate archetype of vitality, a corrupted anima compels you to retreat into hollow fantasies rather than actively engaging with the world around you. This dynamic operates much like a psychological vampire, systematically draining away your vital energy and leaving you completely devoid of motivation. You may find yourself paralyzed by chronic passivity, waking up each day consumed by apathy and a profound sense of meaninglessness. Paradoxically, the internal archetype of the woman provides immense comfort against life's cruelties, yet simultaneously acts as the supreme illusionist, using her Maya to entangle you in a perpetual dance where hope and despair perfectly offset one another. An even more insidious expression of a harmful anima draws you into a toxic cerebral exercise, typical of artificial debates that prevent you from genuinely experiencing existence and making concrete choices. You might find yourself analyzing existence to such a degree that active participation becomes impossible. When maternal influence overwhelms young men, they frequently retreat into academic pursuits, immersing themselves in literature and complex philosophical debates as a defensive strategy to evade maternal dominance and animus pressure, assuming these areas remain beyond maternal comprehension. By doing so, you preserve your intellectual maleness, but surrender your raw, earthly vigor and generative power. The dynamic force required to physically shape the world and grapple with tangible reality is abandoned because it demands too much effort. Instead, you take refuge in abstract thought. Ultimately, these philosophical pursuits mask an absence of authentic inquiry, reducing the endeavor to a superficial manipulation of terminology that carries no real substance. An excessive maternal bond can damage your anima just as severely as a traumatic maternal history. This dynamic often results in a loss of masculine resolve, leaving you vulnerable to manipulation by women and ill-equipped to navigate the inevitable struggles of adulthood. Such a mother complex shatters the anima, leading you to idolize the concept of femininity to an unhealthy degree. Consequently, you may adopt a regressive lifestyle, retreating from the harsh realities of society to seek the comforting, sheltered embrace reminiscent of infancy. Psychologists identify this condition as the Puer Aeternus, or the archetype of eternal youth, frequently referred to as Peter Pan syndrome. This inner child god carries a dark undercurrent, an unconscious urge to retreat entirely into the maternal womb, a phenomenon clearly visible in contemporary society among socially underdeveloped adults who refuse to mature. Conversely, a fractured anima might cause you to harbor contempt for women, reducing them to mere instruments for your own carnal gratification. Erotic daydreaming remains the most common expression of this archetype, transforming into an obsessive habit, primarily when you fail to mature emotionally and neglect the development of genuine, heartfelt connections. You might unknowingly project these internal facets outward, mistakenly perceiving them as the inherent traits of a specific woman. This internal feminine energy is precisely what triggers sudden, overwhelming infatuation. It convinces you instantly that a stranger is your destined partner. Under this spell, you experience an unshakable certainty that you have shared a profound, timeless intimacy with her, surrendering to a passion so intense that observers might consider it sheer insanity. The German legend of the Lorelei beautifully illustrates this danger, depicting alluring water spirits whose enchanting songs drag captivated sailors to their doom. In this context, the anima represents an illusory pursuit of romance, joy, and maternal security, a captivating illusion that distracts you from the actual world. Furthermore, you can project this psychological entity onto inanimate objects, much like a maritime captain who acts as the symbolic spouse to his vessel, a tradition that likely explains his duty to perish alongside her if she founders. Nevertheless, this archetype encompasses far more than mere carnal desire, as evidenced by its association with universal figures of feminine power, such as Cybele, the goddess of nature, and Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Your anima possesses equally crucial constructive qualities, serving as an essential mediator that aligns your consciousness with authentic core values and grants access to profound psychological depths. Dante's Divine Comedy provides a perfect literary example through the character of Beatrice, who acts as this inner guide, leading the protagonist upward into the celestial spheres after his harrowing journey through the underworld. The evolution of this internal feminine figure unfolds across 4 distinct developmental phases, beginning with the archetype of Eve, who embodies strictly primal and biological connections. The subsequent phase is mirrored in Faust's Helen, a persona that elevates the dynamic to a romantic and artistic plane, though it remains firmly rooted in physical attraction. Advancing to the 3rd tier, we encounter the symbolic Virgin Mary, an incarnation that exalts Eros into the realm of profound spiritual reverence. Finally, the ultimate realization is embodied by Sapientia, representing a transcendent wisdom that surpasses even the highest standards of purity and holiness. Contemporary individuals seldom achieve this final tier of psychological maturity, although the enigmatic portrait of the Mona Lisa serves as a profound visual approximation of this ultimate, enlightened state. From a practical standpoint, this archetype becomes your spiritual navigator when you genuinely acknowledge the emotions, shifting moods, and vivid imaginings it produces, subsequently translating them into tangible mediums like literature, visual art, or musical scores. Once you anchor an internal vision within a physical medium, you must treat it with utmost seriousness, viewing it as a concrete truth rather than dismissing it as mere imagination. By dedicating yourself to this practice consistently, you facilitate the authentic unfolding of individuation, effectively bridging the gap between your hidden mind and external reality. Because the hidden layers of our psyche can never be permanently conquered or exhausted, Carl Jung designed his analytical psychology to foster complete personal integration. You achieve this psychological wholeness by continually drawing hidden elements into your waking awareness, engaging in a perpetual journey of self-actualization and alignment with your ultimate self. To prevent your journey of personal growth from grinding to a halt, you must make the challenging yet straightforward choice to validate your internal, emotional, and imaginative experiences, as this is the only method to comprehend this archetype's true internal significance. Through this acceptance, the archetype reverts to its fundamental purpose, serving as your internal feminine counterpart, responsible for transmitting crucial insights directly from your core self. The Scottish author William Sharp provides a remarkable illustration of this dynamic, having composed profound works on Celtic mythology and the natural world under the closely guarded female alias, Fiona MacLeod. He channeled his deepest emotional and spiritual truths directly through this primal feminine voice, tapping into a wellspring of vitality that allowed him to become truly animated with life. Relying solely on his conventional, external masculine identity, he would have found it impossible to articulate such profound and resonant artistic expressions. The author recognized that his literary creations were not entirely his own isolated doing. He actually maintained a correspondence with his feminine alter ego, Fiona, who would reply to his letters as if they were entirely distinct individuals. This phenomenon represents an extraordinary level of psychological realism that perfectly illustrates the integration of the anima. Interestingly, the renowned poet William Butler Yeats openly admired the literary works produced by Fiona, yet he harbored a distinct distaste for the pieces penned under the name William Sharp. Conversely, the animus serves as the internal masculine counterpart within a woman, embodying all her male psychological traits, complete with both positive and negative dimensions. Unlike its counterpart, this force rarely manifests as romantic daydreams or shifting moods. Instead, it frequently emerges as deeply entrenched, almost unassailable beliefs regarding personal assumptions. A common narrative this inner voice relentlessly loops in a woman's mind might sound like an absolute despair over unrequited affection, or a rigid, pessimistic view that limits any given scenario to only two equally disastrous outcomes. In the same way a mother shapes the contours of a man's anima, a woman's father heavily dictates the development of her animus. Through this paternal influence, the internal masculine figure becomes armed with seemingly absolute, undeniable certainties that completely ignore the actual, lived reality of the woman herself. Consequently, the destructive facets of this archetype can isolate her from genuine human connections, trapping her inside a web of idealized fantasies and rigid judgments about how the world should function, effectively severing her ties to the present moment. We can observe a striking illustration of this malignant animus in the classic legend of Bluebeard, the sinister figure who conceals the murdered bodies of his previous spouses in a forbidden room. After taking a new bride, he strictly forbids her from unlocking that specific chamber of horrors, a rule she inevitably breaks when consumed by an overwhelming inquisitiveness. Through this dark narrative, the archetype embodies the icy, ruinous thoughts that can overwhelm a woman's psyche, driving her towards such profound bitterness that she might actually harbor lethal intentions toward those around her. By silently harboring these toxic mindsets, a wife might unwittingly push her partner, or a mother her offspring, towards severe misfortune, sickness, or even fatal accidents. Furthermore, she could subconsciously sabotage her children's future relationships, representing a profound malice that almost never reaches her conscious awareness. To illustrate this chilling reality, I recall an elderly acquaintance who, while displaying a photograph of her son who perished at the age of 27, confessed that she preferred his tragic drowning over surrendering him to another woman. When operating beneath the surface, the opinions of this inner figure can trigger an unusual emotional paralysis or instill a profound sense of inadequacy. From the deepest corners of her psyche, this voice relentlessly murmurs that you are utterly beyond redemption, questioning the very purpose of effort and insisting that your circumstances will never improve. Similar to its feminine counterpart, this masculine force can assume a deeply parasitic nature, draining the vitality from those nearby because the individual lacks her own internal energy source. Operating as a psychological vampire, this demonic iteration of the archetype systematically extinguishes every nurturing and distinctly feminine quality within her existence. The tragedy of being overtaken by either the anima or the animus is that you genuinely believe these intrusive thoughts and emotions are entirely your own. Your conscious mind merges so completely with these foreign impulses that it loses the capacity to step back and evaluate their true origin. You become fully hijacked by the unconscious realm, and it is only after the psychological grip loosens that you look back in absolute terror, realizing your words and actions were in complete opposition to your authentic values. Fortunately, much like the anima, this internal male presence is not solely defined by toxic attributes like cruelty, impulsiveness, hollow rhetoric, or quiet malice. It possesses an immensely beneficial dimension as well, functioning as a vital conduit to your true self through potent creative expression. Once a woman consciously acknowledges the nature of this inner force, it transforms into an indispensable ally, providing her with essential masculine strengths such as boldness, objective clarity, spiritual insight, and unwavering courage. In its evolution, this archetype progresses through 4 distinct developmental phases, mirroring the journey of the anima. Initially, it emerges as a symbol of raw physical strength, often taking the form of a muscular athlete or a powerful hero. Following this, it matures into a force of strategic initiative, granting the ability to execute carefully formulated plans. The third iteration elevates the archetype to the realm of intellect and speech, frequently personified by an academic or a spiritual leader, before finally reaching its zenith as the pure embodiment of meaning. At this supreme stage, it serves as a profound intermediary for transcendent experiences, infusing your existence with entirely new purpose. This intricate interplay between the masculine and feminine energies within is absolutely crucial for the process of individuation. Just as Carl Jung famously categorized the anima as the fundamental archetype of life, he designated the animus as the supreme archetype of meaning. Jung frequently pointed to the concept of the syzygy, a celestial pairing joined in holy matrimony, which serves as a universal pattern, echoing the biological reality of the sexes, beautifully mirrored in the mythic partnerships of Shiva and Shakti, or Zeus and Hera. While the feminine principle generates the raw imagery of the psyche and resurrects it from the hidden depths, its masculine counterpart assigns concrete significance to these visions within the conscious external reality. Engaging directly with your unconscious mind functions as a dynamic form of meditation, drawing from its Latin origin meditatio, meaning profound reflection, which naturally facilitates deep psychological healing. A 17th century alchemical lexicon eloquently characterizes this practice as a silent dialogue with an unseen entity, likening it to summoning a divine presence or conversing intimately with your own guardian spirit. By diligently analyzing, documenting, and illustrating your nocturnal visions, you effectively integrate these hidden symbols into your waking life. The most profound of these experiences are known as archetypal dreams, bubbling up from the vast reservoir of the collective unconscious, which Carl Jung navigated through 2 essential therapeutic techniques: amplification and active imagination. To intensify the significance of your dream imagery, you can employ a technique known as amplification, drawing upon historical, cultural, and mythological parallels to give the narrative deeper resonance. Carl Jung referred to this contextual framework as the psychological tissue surrounding our mental images, a method he utilized to prevent interpretations from becoming purely subjective exercises. Over the course of his lifetime, he analyzed approximately 80,000 dreams, ultimately recognizing distinct, recurring patterns that served as profound evidence for his theory of the collective unconscious. When you practice active imagination, you focus on a specific, meaningful fragment of a fantasy, organically expanding upon it by inviting additional hidden elements into your awareness. The primary objective here is to merge these newly unearthed insights with the conscious narrative you have already recorded. Interestingly, you will often find that vividly recurring nocturnal visions begin to fade in intensity and frequency once you deliberately bring their underlying desires into the light of your waking mind. As you encounter the various entities residing within your hidden mind, you must shift your focus away from superficial egotistical concerns or external worldly matters, interrogating your profound inner reality instead. You should never dismiss this symbolic realm as mere illusion. Rather, it represents a potent mechanism designed to magnify your perception. Ultimately, engaging in this dynamic mental exercise serves as a powerful catalyst for actively expanding your overall state of consciousness. The journey of individuation pushes you toward realizing your truest self, allowing you to maintain a unique identity while still forging meaningful connections with the people around you. This transformative path requires you to engage in challenging dialogues, not only with your external environment and loved ones, but also with the profound internal landscape of archetypes. Crucially, you must learn to recognize your corresponding inner opposite, the anima for a man or the animus for a woman, so that you can separate your identity from its influence and avoid being controlled by these intensely real, deeply frustrated internal personas that typically suffer from your complete neglect. Delving into this work reveals vibrant thoughts and powerful emotions existing within you that you likely never considered possible, a concept that feels absurd to the average individual who childishly assumes total mastery over their own mind. Because this naive certainty is so common, grasping the true essence of the anima and animus remains impossible until you actively plunge into this entirely foreign realm of psychological exploration. If you successfully navigate this practice, you will be deeply humbled by the sheer volume of information your ego has remained blind to. However, such profound self-awareness remains incredibly scarce today, as it frequently demands a heavy toll, often manifesting initially as intense neurosis or even more severe psychological distress.